They left me standing alone at my own wedding. They thought it would break me. What they forgot was that my job is to find hidden money and expose fraud for a living. So I did what I do best. I opened a new file. Client, me. Targets, my own family. The silence in the St. Regis ballroom was a living thing, thick and suffocating, broken only by the nervous rustle of the pastor's robes. It was 2 in the afternoon. My wedding was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, throwing dazzling prisms of light across 10 perfect round tables, each draped in imported linen and crowned with a spray of white orchids. Every single seat was empty. My fiancé, Dante, stood by the altar, devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. He ran a cybersecurity firm and was the only person who truly understood the war I'd been fighting my whole life. He walked down the aisle not to meet me, but to hold my hand. His grip was warm and solid against my ice-cold fingers. "They're not coming, are they?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. He was talking about the 100 guests from my side, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my family friends. Even the pastor looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, checking his watch. I didn't answer immediately. My phone, hidden in the pocket of my wedding dress, vibrated against my thigh. It had been buzzing incessantly for the last hour, not with calls from concerned relatives wondering where to park, but with notifications. I pulled it out. The screen was bright with an Instagram Live alert. Bianca is live. My thumb hovered. Bianca, my 27-year-old sister, the influencer, the golden child, the woman who had never worked a day in her life, yet lived in a penthouse my parents paid for. 2 weeks after I'd sent my wedding invitations, she'd announced her engagement party. For today. On my wedding day. I clicked the notification. The video loaded instantly into chaos. A yacht deck, the Atlanta skyline glittering in the background, a DJ blasting music, champagne corks popping. And there they were, my parents, Marcus and Vivian, holding court, laughing with glasses of expensive scotch in their hands. My aunts and uncles who had declined my invitations, citing illness or travel, were dancing behind them. Then, the camera found Bianca. She was laughing, head thrown back, clinging to the arm of her fiancé, Chase. He was nice enough, from old money, the kind of connection my parents had salivated over for decades. But I didn't look at Chase. I looked at what Bianca was wearing. My breath caught, a sharp, painful hitch in my throat. It was a vintage Christian Dior gown, cream-colored silk taffeta with a hand-beaded bodice. My grandmother had bought that dress in Paris in 1958. She had left it to me in her will, specifically to me. It was the one heirloom I treasured above all else. 2 weeks ago, it had vanished from the back of my closet. When I'd called my mother in a panic, she'd sworn up and down I must have misplaced it, that the dry cleaner had lost it. She'd chastised me for being so careless with a family treasure. Lies. All lies. There it was on my sister's body, tailored to fit her, red wine already sloshing dangerously close to the delicate silk. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with a red-hot rage that started deep in my chest and spread to my fingertips, turning them numb. Just as the live stream ended, a text popped up from my mother, Vivian. "Stop calling your aunts. We are at a very important event for Bianca. Chase's grandmother is here, and we need to make a good impression. Do not be selfish, Nia. Your sister needs this dress to look the part. You can have your little ceremony any weekend. We will send a gift later." Don't be selfish. The phrase echoed in the hollow chamber of my skull. I looked at the empty tables, at the thousands of dollars of flowers that would die unseen, at Dante, who was reading the text over my shoulder, his face darkening into something feral. This was never about a schedule conflict. This was a statement. They were telling me, in the most public way possible, exactly where I stood. I was the bank account, the problem solver, the invisible daughter. Bianca was the star. I took a deep breath, the scent of expensive lilies filling my lungs. I did not cry. Crying was for the girl I used to be. The woman I had become did not get sad. She got even. I looked up at Dante, and for the first time that day, I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile I wore when I found a hidden offshore account during an audit. "Do it," I said, my voice steady and cold. Dante looked at me, surprised. "Are you sure, Nia? Once we start this, there's no going back." I looked at my phone one last time, at the frozen image of my sister wearing my grandmother's legacy while my mother smirked in the background. I thought about the mortgage papers I'd reviewed 3 months ago. I thought about the shell company I'd quietly established. I thought about the clause in the trust fund documents my parents had never bothered to read. "I'm sure," I said. "Call the lawyer. Tell him to activate Clause 4B immediately. I want the asset seizure to begin before they even get off that boat." Dante nodded, pulling out his phone. I turned to the terrified pastor. "Reverend," I said, smoothing the skirt of my backup wedding dress. "Let's proceed. I have a marriage to start and a family to evict." The ceremony was a transaction, clinical and precise. Dante and I repeated our vows in the echoing silence, our words absorbed by the empty chairs. When the pastor pronounced us husband and wife, there was no roar of applause, just the polite, pitying clapping of the handful of Dante's friends who had shown up. We cut the cake, a 5-tier masterpiece meant for 200 people. Dante placed his hand over mine, guiding the knife. We fed each other small bites of sweetness that tasted like ashes. As I swallowed, I felt the last tether of obligation within my chest finally snap. Across town, on the deck of the yacht, the atmosphere was shifting from celebration to panic. I wasn't there, but I knew because I had orchestrated it. My mother would be snapping her fingers for another bottle of Dom Perignon for Chase's grandmother, handing over her platinum American Express. The machine would not beep with approval, it would buzz with a rejection. I imagined the color draining from her face beneath her foundation. She would try the Visa, the MasterCard. Declined, declined, declined. My father would bluster about bank errors, but there is no arguing with a frozen asset. Back in the ballroom, my phone began its frantic dance across the white tablecloth. It started as a low hum and escalated to a persistent, angry rhythm. I didn't need to look. For 10 years, I had managed the family fund, a pool of money I contributed to substantially, which my parents used to maintain their lifestyle and support Bianca's delusions. They treated it like a bottomless well, and me as the silent pump. Today, I had turned off the tap. Mom calling, Dad calling, Bianca calling. Then the texts. "Fix this now, Nia. The card isn't working. Transfer the money immediately. We look like fools. Chase is watching. Pick up the phone, you ungrateful girl." 75 missed calls. 75 times they reached out not to congratulate me, not to apologize, but to demand I save them. I picked up the phone. Dante watched, ready to step in if I wavered. I did not waver. I swiped the power off button. A profound quiet settled over us. For the first time that day, a genuine smile touched my lips, the smile of a woman who had finally put down a heavy load she'd been carrying since childhood. I opened my email app and drafted a single message. To Marcus and Vivian Brooks. Subject, Notice of Termination. The family fund is closed. The house is no longer yours. The dress belongs to me. Our contract as family has been terminated, effective immediately. I hit send. We didn't go to a honeymoon suite. Dante drove us back to my townhouse in Buckhead. The silence in the car was heavy with the weight of what I'd just done. I went straight to my home office, still in my wedding dress, and logged into my security system. A forensic accountant deals in evidence, not feelings, and I needed proof. I pulled up the cloud storage from 2 weeks prior. The timestamp read 10:42 a.m. A black SUV pulled into my driveway. My mother, Vivian, stepped out looking over her shoulder. She retrieved the spare key from the planter and let herself in. The interior camera caught her marching upstairs. 10 minutes later, she descended. In her right hand, a garment bag with the unmistakable vintage Dior logo. In her left, a velvet box. My grandmother's pearl necklace, valued at over $150,000, the only thing I had left of the woman who actually raised me. I saved the clip and emailed it to my attorney and the district attorney's office. The aggressive pounding on my front door shattered the quiet. On the live feed, my parents and Bianca stood on my porch. They still had their keys. Before I could stand, they barged into the foyer. They were a wreck. My mother's makeup was smeared, her hair windblown. My father's face was a dangerous purple. "How dare you?" my mother screamed. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? The waiter cut the card in front of Mrs. Sterling. We had to ask Chase to cover the deposit. We looked like paupers." "You ungrateful child," my father spat, pacing. "We raised you. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? Transfer $50,000 to the main account right now, or I will disown you." Bianca pointed a manicured finger at me, her tears those of rage, not sorrow. "You're just jealous, Nia. You've always been jealous because I'm marrying real money and you settled for him." She gestured dismissively at Dante. "Give Mom the money so we can save face." I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at them. I felt absolutely nothing. The fear, the desire to please had evaporated, leaving only cold resolve. I opened my email app and displayed a freeze frame of my mother walking out of my house with the stolen goods. "I don't care about your humiliation. I care about my property. You broke into my home, you stole a dress and jewelry left to me in a legal will." My mother laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Don't be ridiculous. It's family property. I decided Bianca needed it more. You're not going to do anything. You never do. You're too weak." Bianca smirked. "What are you going to do? Call the cops on your own mother? You don't have the guts." I memorized their arrogance. "Return the dress and the necklace immediately, or I report this as grand larceny and burglary. I have the footage. You have 24 hours." They looked at me with pity and disgust, utterly convinced I was bluffing. My father spat on my floor as he turned to leave. "We'll expect that transfer by morning, or you'll regret it." They slammed the door, leaving behind silence and the smell of expensive perfume mixed with sweat. They had no idea I had already filled out the police report. I locked the deadbolt and dialed the non-emergency line. I wasn't bluffing. I didn't sleep that night. While Dante rested, I retreated to my office and booted up my secure server. It was time to perform an autopsy on my parents' financial life. The first red flag was a property title search. The sprawling colonial they lived in, the crown jewel of their image, wasn't theirs. My grandmother had bought it. She left the deed entirely to me with a clause allowing my parents to live there rent-free for life, provided they paid utilities and taxes. They were glorified squatters. I pulled up recent county filings. My heart stuttered. 3 months ago, a second mortgage had been taken out on the property for $300,000. The exact budget Bianca had bragged about for her engagement party. They had mortgaged my inheritance to fund her social climb. But how do you mortgage a house you don't own? I accessed the loan documents. There, at the bottom, was the signature of the property owner, Nia Brooks, in a looping flourish that looked nothing like my jagged script. A forgery, and a bad one. I recognized the curl of the N, my mother's handwriting. They'd crossed from family betrayal to federal mortgage fraud, bank fraud, identity theft. I printed the documents, lined them up next to the burglary footage. I had them completely. I called the bank's fraud department at 3 a.m. and flagged the account. Then I drafted another email to my attorney. Subject, mortgage fraud and eviction proceedings. I didn't feel guilt. They had mortgaged their future for a night of champagne. Now the bill was coming due, and I was the collector. But sending them to jail felt too quick, too sterile. I needed something more absolute. I needed to hold the leash. I opened my banking portal. I had serious liquidity, and my parents were drowning. The bank holding the fraudulent note was sitting on a toxic asset. Banks hate toxic assets. I called my lawyer again. I need a rush on a new business entity, a Delaware LLC. Total anonymity. Call it Nemesis Holdings. Within 48 hours, it was done. My next call was to the distressed assets manager at the bank holding the mortgage. I introduced myself as a representative of Nemesis Holdings, a private equity firm looking to acquire high-risk debt. In a glass-walled office downtown, I sat across from a nervous executive. I wore a black suit and dark sunglasses. I offered to buy the mortgage note for 60 cents on the dollar, a lowball offer, but he was terrified. If the forgery came to light, the loan was void and they'd have no collateral. He barely hesitated. I signed the assignment of mortgage. With that signature, the ownership of the debt transferred from the bank to me. I walked out with a single folder. The weight of it was intoxicating. Inside was the promissory note signed with my forged name. My parents thought they'd secured free money. They had no idea they'd just sold their souls to me. I drove past their house on my way home. Bianca's car was in the driveway. My mother was pruning roses in soil I owned. They were living inside the belly of the beast, and they didn't even know they'd been swallowed. "You bought it, didn't you?" Dante asked when I got home, pouring me wine. "I bought it all," I said, placing the folder on the counter. "I own the debt, I own the interest, I am their landlord, their bank, and their executioner." "So what happens when they miss the next payment?" Nemesis Holdings sends a notice of default. If they don't pay in full, which they can't, Nemesis Holdings forecloses. I can evict them. I can padlock the door and toss their furniture to the curb, and it will be completely legal. They wanted to play games with property and ownership. Now they were just tenants in a house of cards, and I was the wind. I wasn't going to blow it down yet. I was going to let them get comfortable, let them spend every last dime on Bianca's wedding, and then, when they had nothing left, I would call in the debt. The performance continued. My mother called, her voice tight. "The Sterlings want a family dinner. You have to come, Nia, and for God's sake, don't talk about your little detective investigations. We told them you work in administration." I agreed. I wanted a front row seat. The dinner was at a French restaurant where the menus had no prices. I wore a simple, expensive black dress. Mrs. Sterling was old money, her pearls worn like armor. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent. "And what do you do, Nia?" she asked. Before I could answer, my mother cut in, her laugh shrill. "Oh, Nia is such a help around the office. She's an administrative assistant, filing, scheduling. She's very organized, but she prefers a quiet life. She's not ambitious like Bianca." Bianca sipped her champagne. "Yes, poor Nia. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Barely. We try to help her out." The table went quiet. I saw Dante's jaw clench. I pressed my heel gently on his foot. Not yet. I took a sip of water. "That's right," I said softly. "I just handled the paperwork. I'm very good with paperwork, especially the numbers." Mrs. Sterling looked at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She sensed the lie. I excused myself to the ladies' room, leaving my sleek leather work portfolio on the table, slightly askew. Inside was not my resume. It was Bianca's comprehensive credit report. 6 maxed-out cards, a credit score in the low 400s, a pending lawsuit for unpaid rent. I counted the seconds in the restroom. When I returned, the atmosphere had shifted. The air was colder. Mrs. Sterling sat very straight. The folder was closed. She wasn't looking at Bianca anymore. She was looking at me. She knew. Bianca babbled about honeymoons, oblivious. Mrs. Sterling was silent. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Sterling?" I asked innocently. She looked at the folder, then back at me, her lips curving a microscopic smile of acknowledgement, a warrior recognizing another warrior.
Everything is quite illuminating, Nia. Quite illuminating indeed. The trap was sprung. Back in my office, fueled by rage and espresso, I dug deeper. I ran a sweep of my identifiers. The system flagged 3 high-limit credit cards issued in my name with a billing address I'd never used, opened 18 months ago, right when Bianca moved into her penthouse. The transaction history was a roadmap of her vanity, her Mercedes lease, first-class flights, lip fillers, Botox, and recent charges, the wedding florist deposit, the DJ down payment. She had spent $50,000 in my name. She had built her golden pedestal on my credit score. Identity theft, a federal crime. I didn't scream. I called the credit bureaus, I filed affidavits and police reports. I marked every transaction as fraudulent. I wanted them to find out the hard way. 2 days later, the confirmation came via a panicked all-caps text in the family group chat from Bianca. Has anyone else's card stopped working? I'm at the bridal salon and it keeps declining. Mom, help! I read it over my morning tea. My mother couldn't help. Her assets were tied up in the mortgage I now owned. They were in a financial cage, and I had just locked the door. Then the final provocation. Scrolling through my timeline, I saw it. Bianca had posted photos from a pre-wedding party. The caption, "Customizing vintage for the modern bride. Out with the old, in with the fabulous." There she was, posing, in my grandmother's Dior. Butchered. The floor-length skirt was hacked off above the knee into a jagged hem. The delicate lace sleeves were ripped off, leaving raw edges. She had turned a piece of history, a piece of my soul, into a fast fashion disaster. A ragged, dying sound escaped my throat. The pain was physical, a sharp ache in my chest. Then it crystallized into ice. I drafted a formal demand letter for $25,000, the appraised value. I attached the will, the appraisal, the screenshots. I drove to their house and placed the invoice on the coffee table. "What is this?" my father growled, picking it up. $25,000 for a used dress? I said it was a vintage Dior, an heirloom. Bianca stole it and destroyed it. This is the bill. Bianca laughed. "Oh, please, it was an old rag. I did you a favor." My mother waved a hand. "Really, Nia, must you put a price tag on everything? It's just clothes. Your grandmother would have wanted her to enjoy it." My grandmother left it to me, not her. You owe me $25,000. My father stood, his face mottled. He ripped the invoice in half, then in quarters, and threw the pieces in my face. "We owe you nothing. Get out of my house." I watched the pieces flutter down. They were laughing. They thought tearing up paper made the debt disappear. I knelt, picked up one shred, and put it in my pocket. "Okay," I said, "you've made your position clear." I walked out gently. They thought they'd won. They didn't know they'd just given me the final evidence of malicious intent. The summons for a family meeting came soon. Another trap. I walked into their living room. My mother poured tea with shaking hands. "We have a small problem," she began. "We told the Sterlings we were gifting Bianca a property, a starter home, to show we're contributors." I waited. I knew. "We told them we were giving her a condo, a nice one, in Midtown." I owned a condo in Midtown, a 2-bedroom investment property, my asset. "You want my apartment?" Wasn't a question. "It's for your sister," my father said, his tone shifting to that manipulative baritone. "Think about it. Chase is going to be incredibly wealthy. Once they're married, Bianca will have access to millions. She'll pay you back. Sisters have to help sisters."
On the table were transfer of deed forms. They wanted me to sign over a $300,000 asset for zero so they could lie to billionaires. "This is my retirement fund," I said slowly. "You want me to hand it over so you can play pretend?" My mother leaned forward, her sweetness evaporating. "Don't be so transactional. This is an investment in the family. Bianca is the one marrying into power. You can afford to take a hit. Do you want her to look like a beggar?" So I'm the sacrifice. Again. My father slammed his hand on the table. You're being selfish. If Bianca doesn't have a property, Mrs. Sterling will think we're frauds. She might call off the wedding. Do you want to be responsible for destroying your sister's happiness? I reached into my pocket and silently tapped record. Let me get this straight, I said, feigning hesitation. You told the Sterlings you owned my condo, and now you want me to sign it over to Bianca for free to hide that you have no money. And if I don't, you'll blame me for ruining the wedding. Yes, she hissed. Exactly. It's a loan of assets. Just sign. I picked up the pen, hovered over the signature line. I watched them hold their breath. I can't sign today, I said, lowering the pen. I need 48 hours to check the tax implications. If I gift a property of this value, the IRS will audit me. My mother's eyes lit with fear at the word audit. Just fix it, Nia. Make it happen by Friday. I stood, taking the unsigned documents. I'll see what I can do. I walked out with evidence of attempted extortion in my pocket and their confession on my phone. They thought I was going home to prepare a gift. I was going home to prepare a lawsuit. While I navigated property fraud, Dante fought his own battle. My father, desperate, had approached one of Dante's competitors, offering to sell proprietary client lists and beta codes, corporate espionage. He asked for $50,000, the exact amount needed for the wedding catering deposit. Dante, a man who hunted hackers for a living, set a honeypot. He created a dummy file of impressive-looking, useless code that pinged its location when opened. He left it on a drive in the guest room. My father copied it. 2 days later, my father met a shady broker, sold the secrets for $20,000, and spent it on a custom ice sculpture. The rival firm, realizing they'd bought gibberish, threatened legal action for fraud. My parents were now fighting on two fronts, the bank and a tech company. The walls were closing in. The pressure mounted. They needed that wedding more than ever. They needed access to the Sterling fortune to pay off the debts they'd accrued trying to impress the Sterlings. They took their final, fatal step. I tracked their location to a pawn shop on the south side. They walked out with a duffel bag containing $200,000 in cash, a hard money loan with an interest rate that would make a loan shark blush, secured by nothing but their kneecaps and a delusion. They threw it at the remaining wedding vendors, constructing a fairy tale on quicksand. I sat in my lawyer's office with the completed lawsuit, a paper guillotine, but I waited. I needed the stage set. I took a manila envelope and slid in a curated selection, the forged mortgage application, Bianca's credit report, a photo of my parents entering the pawn shop. I sealed it and called a courier. Deliver this to the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons for Mrs. Elizabeth Sterling directly into her hands. An hour later, confirmation. I imagined Mrs. Sterling opening it, putting on her reading glasses. She would see the forgery, the debt, the criminal transaction, and she would pick up the phone. I need a full background check on Marcus and Vivian Brooks, and I need it by morning. The trap was baited. The wedding day arrived. The venue was a sprawling estate of manicured lawns and marble columns. I arrived 10 minutes before the procession. I did not wear pastel. I wore black. A floor-length silk gown with long sleeves and a high neck, a black veil on my fascinator. I was not a guest. I was the angel of death. I took a seat in the front row directly across from Mrs. Sterling. A murmur rippled through the congregation. My mother stiffened, her knuckles white. The organ swelled. My father walked down the aisle, sweating profusely, his eyes darting. Then Bianca, in a gaudy, crystal-covered gown, and around her neck, my grandmother's South Sea pearls. Seeing them on her was a physical violation, the final confirmation. Chase stood at the altar, smiling, oblivious. The pastor began. If anyone here present knows of any just cause why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence was heavy. Every eye darted at me, the woman in black. My mother's eyes pleaded. Bianca's smile faltered. I did not stand. I did not shout. I raised my left wrist and looked at my watch. The second hand ticked over. 2 p.m. The assets are seized, the warrants are active. I lowered my wrist and met my mother's gaze. It's over. Then the heavy oak doors at the back of the church groaned open. The rhythmic thud of boots on stone echoed through the silent sanctuary. 4 uniformed officers and 2 detectives marched down the center aisle. A bailiff held a thick leather binder. The lead detective stepped on the dais. "Marcus and Vivian Brooks, you are under arrest." He listed the charges: bank fraud, aggravated forgery, conspiracy. He spun my father around, slammed him against the altar railing, and clicked the cuffs on his wrists. My mother screamed. 2 officers moved on her. Chase stepped back, horrified. Mrs. Sterling sat motionless. The bailiff stepped forward, stopping in front of Bianca. "Miss Brooks, acting on behalf of the creditor Nemesis Holdings, all assets associated with the defendants are hereby seized." He pulled out a photograph of the pearls around her neck. "That necklace is listed as stolen property. Hand it over or you will be charged with possession of stolen property." With shaking hands, Bianca fumbled with the clasp. She held out the shimmering strand. The bailiff took it and sealed it in an evidence bag. The sound of the plastic zipping shut was the final note of the ceremony. Chase stood frozen. I stood and walked toward the altar. I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd captured, my mother's voice, then Bianca's, cold and cruel, planning to take half of Chase's money and put his mother in a home. A collective gasp. Mrs. Sterling stood, her face a mask of cold fury. Bianca lunged at me, screaming about edits and lies, but the bailiff blocked her. Chase flinched as if slapped. I handed him a stack of bank statements. "Your joint account for the house down payment. You thought the balance was $200,000. He flipped to the last page. Withdrawals for offshore gaming sites, casinos, payments to the hard money lender. The balance was negative.
"You emptied it," Chase whispered, broken. "You gambled our future away." Bianca sobbed, reaching for him. "Baby, please, I can fix it." Chase looked at her, all love gone, replaced by absolute disgust. He twisted the platinum band off his finger and dropped it. It hit the stone with a sharp ping. "There is no us," he said, his voice dead. "There never was." He walked away, past me, to his mother. Mrs. Sterling adjusted her hat, looked at me, and nodded once, a sharp acknowledgement. "Come, Chase, we are leaving." The entire Sterling side of the church rose and marched out, leaving Bianca alone at the altar. The vacuum of silence filled with a raw, guttural scream. Bianca's mask shattered into pure rage. "You did this!" she shrieked, lunging for me, fingers curled into claws. I waited, pivoted at the last second. She stumbled past, her bare feet slipping on the stone. She pitched forward, arms windmilling, directly into the 5-tier wedding cake. There was a sickening crunch. The tower swayed, then collapsed on top of her in an explosion of white frosting and red raspberry filling. She lay sprawled in the ruins, gasping, covered head to toe in buttercream, her rented gown decimated. I looked down at her. "That's a rental," I said. "The deposit is $3,000. I checked your credit report, Bianca. You don't have it." Before she could respond, a new commotion. 3 men in ill-fitting suits entered through a side door. Not police, not guests, the enforcement arm of the hard money lender. The leader locked eyes with my father, tapped his wrist, and pointed at the ground. "Time's up." The police shoved my parents forward. As they passed me, my mother looked up, her face a ruin of tears and terror. "Help us, Naya," she whispered. "Please, you have money. Pay them off. Make this stop. We're your parents." I looked at her, at the handcuffs, at the lone sharks in the shadows. I shook my head slowly. "I can't help you," I said, my voice devoid of pity. "I'm just a secretary, remember? I don't have that kind of money." I watched them go, the doors swallowing them whole, leaving only the scent of sugar and fear. 3 months later, I sat in the back of the federal courthouse. My parents stood before the judge in orange jumpsuits, trembling.
The sentence was 3 years for mortgage fraud and identity theft. The gavel bang was the sound of their lives ending. Nemesis Holdings foreclosed on the house, repossessed the cars, sold everything. They were bankrupt in every way. Bianca avoided prison with a plea deal, but was convicted of felony identity theft. She was ordered to pay me full restitution plus legal fees and given 2,000 hours of community service. Socially, she was erased. The viral video of her screaming in cake saw to that. I drove past a fast food burger chain on the outskirts of town one rainy afternoon. Through the greasy window, I saw her, Bianca, in a polyester uniform 2 sizes too big, wiping down tables, her hair under a hairnet. A customer yelled at her. She shrank, mumbled an apology, shoulders hunched. Broken. I didn't go in. Seeing her there was enough. The collect call from the prison came 3 weeks into their sentence. I accepted. My mother's voice was unrecognizable, a whimpering, broken sound. She begged. She was sorry. She wanted bail, a lawyer, for me to buy her freedom. I went to see her. The visitation room was gray. She looked small, ordinary in her baggy orange jumpsuit. Desperate hope filled her eyes when she saw me. "Naya, thank God," she breathed. "You have to get us out, please. We learned our lesson. You have money. Get us out." I listened to her rambling pleas, her blame, her attempted manipulation. I said nothing. I reached into my bag, pulled out a glossy photograph, and held it to the glass. It was a picture of me, standing on the front lawn of their colonial house. The shutters were now sleek black. The ivy was gone. Dante stood with his arm around me. We looked powerful, happy, like the owners. "I bought it back from the bank," I said. "I got a great deal on a foreclosure. It's my house now. I turned your sewing room into a walk-in closet. We burned the furniture." Her mouth fell open. A sound of pure anguish escaped. "You took our home!" "You lost it," I corrected. "You bet it on a lie, and the house won." She started to sob. "How can you be so cruel? I'm your mother." "You chose me to be an accessory," I said, leaning forward. "You chose Bianca. Every single day for 30 years, you chose her comfort over my safety, her vanity over my dignity, her wedding over my future. You made your investment, Mother. You put all your equity into Bianca, so you should ask for a return on that investment." I stood. "But she has no money," my mother pleaded, slamming her hand against the glass. "She's broke. She can't help us." "Exactly," I said. "You bet on the wrong horse, and now you're both bankrupt." I looked at her one last time, feeling the cool, clean sensation of a balance sheet finally reconciled. "You chose Bianca. Now let her bail you out." I hung up the phone. The click was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. I didn't look back. 6 months later, the house was alive with the warm hum of genuine connection. Our home-warming party. My real friends. My attorney. Dante's colleagues. I wore emerald green, a color my mother had forbidden, and my grandmother's pearls back where they belonged, cool and heavy against my skin. A crown, not a burden. Dante wrapped his arms around me. "You look like you own the place." "I do, in every way that matters." My phone buzzed. An unknown number. The preview text. "Naya, please pick up. It's cold and I have nowhere to go. I'm your sister. Just answer me." A year ago, it would have sent me into a spiral of guilt. Now, I felt a profound stillness. I swiped. Delete. Then block caller. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, a receipt for a bill already paid, and joined the circle of warmth around the fire. I looked up at the clear night sky above Atlanta. The silence at my wedding hadn't been an insult. It had been a clearing, the universe making space for the life I was meant to have. They didn't come to my wedding.
That was the greatest gift they ever gave me. Their absence is my peace. The stillness after the party was profound, a clean quiet that settled into the bones of the house. There were no ghosts here, not anymore. Dante was upstairs, the soft clatter of his keyboard the only sign of life beyond the crackle of the dying fire in the pit. The scent of wood smoke and good coffee had replaced the cloying perfume of lilies and lies. I looked at the large kitchen window, looking out at the dark, redesigned garden. My garden. My land.
The blocked call from Bianca was a stone dropped into deep water, the ripples fading instantly. There was no echo. It was a curious feeling, this absolute nullity where there used to be a churning vortex of obligation and guilt. For weeks after the arrests, a part of me had braced for a second wave, a desperate aunt, a cousin acting as a flying monkey, a tear-soaked plea from a probation officer. But the silence held. The Brooks family, as Atlanta knew them, had not just been humiliated, they had been terminally shunned. No one wanted to touch the contagion. 3 weeks after the housewarming, my lawyer, a razor-sharp woman named Evelyn Cho, called. The foreclosure sale on the Maple Street property is finalized. Nemesis Holdings is now the legal and undisputed owner. All appeals exhausted. The paperwork is on its way to you. And the other assets? I asked, my voice detached. The auction of the vehicles and personal effects covered a fraction of the debt to Nemesis. The remainder, plus the restitution order from Bianca's criminal case, is a personal, unsecured debt she now carries. It's been filed with the court. Every dollar she earns above a basic subsistence level for the next 20 years is technically garnishable. Evelyn paused. It's a life sentence of debt, Nia. You understand that. I do, I said, and meant it. Financial purgatory was a fate my parents and sister would understand far better than a prison cell. It was a language they spoke fluently. Every declined credit card swipe, every rejected rental application, every side-eyed glance from a bank teller would be a whisper of my name. One more thing, Evelyn added, her tone shifting. I received an inquiry from a private investigator, licensed, reputable. He was asking very general, very careful questions about the formation of Nemesis Holdings, its funding sources. A cold finger traced my spine. Who hired him? He wouldn't say. Client confidentiality. But his questions were pointed. He wasn't looking for fraud. He was looking for origin. He was tracing the money that bought the debt. Mrs. Sterling. It had to be. The matriarch wasn't just cutting ties. She was conducting her own forensic audit. She's seen the play at the wedding, recognized a fellow strategist, and now she wanted to map the board herself. It wasn't a threat, it was due diligence. A woman like Elizabeth Sterling would never let a variable like me remain unquantified. Let her look, I said finally. Nemesis is a black box. The trail leads to a Delaware registered agent and a series of encrypted offshore financial transfers she'll never unravel. All she'll find is a ghost with very good lawyers. Evelyn chuckled. Just wanted you to be aware. The chess game continues, even after checkmate. I spent the next month not looking over my shoulder, but rebuilding. I poured myself into the forensic accounting firm I'd built from nothing, taking on high-stakes corporate fraud cases that paid staggering fees and fed the cold, logical part of my soul. Dante's cybersecurity firm flourished in tandem. We were a fortress, not just of money, but of data and intent. I avoided the neighborhoods where I might see reminders of them, but the city has a way of forcing confrontations. It was a Tuesday, raining hard, the kind of downpour that turns Atlanta into a glassy labyrinth. I was driving back from a client meeting in Midtown, navigating the slick streets, when my windshield wipers slapped away the water to reveal a familiar figure at a bus stop. Bianca. She was huddled under the inadequate plexiglass shelter, clutching a thin jacket around her. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by cheap, synthetic fabrics that soaked through instantly, clinging to a frame that had lost its curated plumpness. Her hair, which was her pride, was pulled into a lank, greasy ponytail. She was staring at the ground, her shoulders slumped, not in tragedy, but in a dull, exhausted defeat. The light was red. I was trapped in the lane closest to the curb, my sleek, silent electric car a world away from the shuddering bus she was waiting for. As if sensing the weight of a gaze, she looked up. Her eyes met mine through the rain-streaked window. There was no flash of rage, no hatred, no recognition even. Her eyes were empty, windows to a hollowed-out room. She looked at the car, at the blurred shape of the driver, and saw nothing. An obstacle in the rain, a random person in a warm, dry vehicle. She was so far removed from the life that included me, she didn't even see me. The light turned green. I drove on, the image searing itself behind my eyes. That was true destruction, not the screaming at the altar, but this erasure. I had not just taken her money, her status, her family. I had taken her very context. She was a footnote in her own life. It should have felt like victory. It felt like nothing, a nullity just like her call. A different package arrived at my office a week later, not from a lawyer, but my special courier. Heavy, cream-colored stock, my name engraved in simple, elegant script. Inside was a card. Ms. Brooks, a mutual acquaintance, the law, suggests our paths are unlikely to cross socially. Nonetheless, one should acknowledge a masterful game. Should your professional interests ever align with the preservation of capital, my associates would be interested in a conversation. Discretion, of course, is assumed. It was, as you said, illuminating. E.S. No return address, just the initials. Elizabeth Sterling wasn't just offering friendship, not forgiveness, but a professional nod, a treaty between sovereign powers. I slid the card into my shredder. The offer was genuine and dangerous. Aligning with the Sterlings meant stepping back into a world of performative wealth and hidden agendas. I had burned my old world to the ground. I had no interest in being a useful mercenary in someone else's. My peace was in the life I'd built from the ashes, not in becoming a hired weapon for another dynasty. The final, true closure came from an unexpected and mundane source, a dusty, forgotten storage unit. My grandmother, the pragmatic one, had paid for a decade up front on a small unit years ago. The payment had lapsed only recently, and the management company, after failing to reach my parents at their old address, finally tracked the deed holder, me, down. Dante and I went on a Saturday, more out of archaeological curiosity than hope. The unit was the size of a walk-in closet, crammed with boxes of papers and a few old trunks. The air smelled of dust and aged paper. We spent the afternoon sorting. Most of it was tax returns, old medical bills, the detritus of a long life. But in a small, metal-lined trunk, under a stack of quilts, I found her treasure. Not jewels, not stock certificates, journals. Dozens of them, leather-bound, pages filled with my grandmother's elegant looping script, and photographs, not the staged family portraits my parents displayed, but candid shots. My grandmother as a young woman in Paris, smiling next to the Eiffel Tower, my grandfather fixing a car, grinning at her behind the camera, a tiny, serious-looking me sitting on her lap, her arms around me as we read a book. And at the very bottom, a sealed envelope with my name on it. With careful fingers, I opened it. My dearest Nia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've found your way here. I always knew you would be the one to sort through the rubble. You have the clearest eyes. I saw the path your parents were on, the favoritism, the vanity. I tried to steer them, but some currents are too strong. I left you the house and the dress not just because I loved you, but because I knew you were the only one strong enough to hold it, to know its true value isn't in the bricks or the silk, but in the history it carries, the history of a woman who built her own life. Don't let their weakness become your burden. If they try to take what's yours, fight. Fight with everything you have. You are not cold, my darling. You are a preservationist. You are saving what's real from what is false. Be happy. Build your own family, whether by blood or by choice, and never, ever apologize for protecting what is yours. All my love, always. Grandma Eleanor. I sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit, the letter in my hands, and finally, I wept. Not the harsh, angry sobs of betrayal, but the deep, cleansing tears of being seen. She had known. She had seen the future, and she had armed me for it. The dress, the pearls, the house, they weren't just inheritances. They were weapons and shields left in trust for the coming war. Dante sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders, saying nothing, just letting the decades of misunderstood strength finally find its validation. We took the journals and the photographs. We donated the quilts to a women's shelter. We left the tax returns for the shredder. That night, I framed one of the photographs and placed it on the mantel in the living room of my house, our house. It was the one of my grandmother and me reading. I looked at her calm, smiling face, then at my own small, serious one. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room. The past was finally, fully put to rest. Not buried, but archived, understood. Life moved into a rhythm that was entirely its own. The firm grew. Dante and I traveled, not to extravagant, showy locations, but to places we genuinely wanted to see. Hiking in remote national parks, getting lost in the museums of Berlin, learning to cook pasta in a small village in Italy. We built a life of authentic choice, not performative consumption. A year to the day after the wedding that wasn't, Dante came home with a picnic basket and a mysterious smile. He drove us up to a quiet overlook on the edge of the city, the skyline twinkling in the dusk. There was no grand speech. He simply pulled out a small velvet box from the basket, next to the cheese and grapes. "I know we're already married," he said, his voice soft. "But that day, it was about endings. I want to give us a beginning, one with just us in it. No ghosts." He opened the box, and inside was a simple, stunning band of woven platinum and rose gold. "A new ring," he said, "for the marriage we actually get to have." I didn't hesitate. I took off the original wedding band, the one from the silent ceremony, and placed it in my pocket, a relic, a token from a different battle. I let him slide the new ring onto my finger. It felt different, lighter. Ours. "Yes," I said, though he hadn't asked a question. "To the beginning." We were married again a month later in the backyard of our house. Just us, a judge, and the ghosts we invited. Grandma Eleanor, smiling from her photograph on a chair beside us. We wrote our own vows, full of promises about chosen futures and shared silence. We ate pizza from our favorite place and drank champagne straight from the bottle, laughing under the stars. No one was invited who hadn't chosen us. No one was missed who hadn't chosen to be there. As the fireflies began to blink in the deepening twilight, I leaned against Dante, my head on his shoulder, the new ring cool on my finger. I thought of the empty ballroom, the echoing vows, the crushing silence. I thought of the yacht, the stolen dress, the cascading notifications of their panic. Then I listened to the sounds of my real life. Dante's steady heartbeat, the cicadas singing, the distant hum of the city that was mine now, not a stage for their performance. They didn't come to my wedding. They had chosen with breathtaking cruelty to show me exactly who they were. And in doing so, they had given me the freedom to finally, completely choose who I am. The silence was no longer deafening. It was peaceful. It was mine. And it was enough.